All right, thank you everyone for joining us for this very interesting discussion today. My name is Simon Senyonga and I am privileged to be moderating this very interesting discussion. Our topic for today is COVID-19 and education. What's the way forward? And today we seek to interrogate some of those key issues which we have not seen in mainstream media or from popular government narrative. We are joined by a very interesting panel who are going to ably handle this question. And in no particular order, I will introduce my panelists for today. One of them is not yet with us. I'm hoping that she's trying to catch up with the different time zones in the USA. But right now, I'm joined by a panel of so far 4 good, distinguished people who are going to handle this matter, actually 5 people. I'll begin with Council Abubakar Matanda. Council Abubakar Matanda has just been recently appointed as a magistrate of the Courts of Law of Uganda. But right now he holds the portfolio of youth leader of the Alliance for National Transformation. He's also a lecturer of law at the Islamic University in Uganda, IUIU. He has been very vocal on issues concerning the protection of fundamental human rights. He recently joined a team of citizens to file a case at the East African Court of Justice challenging the closure of the places of worship in Uganda and how that violated the East African Treaty. That's not a point of discussion today, but Matanda, I just want to welcome you. Thank you so much for being a part of this discussion. I am also joined by another distinguished gentleman, Mr. Jothan Yamurebire Burobuto. Mr. Jothan Yamurebire is the executive director of the Uganda Youth Network. He has served the young people in this nation at different capacities. He served as a guild president in Makerere University, the president of the Makerere Law Society. He has also served as the president of the Uganda National Students Association, the body which brings together all students in Uganda. So I'm hoping that he can I know definitely that he will ably handle this particular discussion. Jothan, you're very welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Then we're also joined by Mr. Mugoya Musa. Mr. Mugoya Musa is a program officer with the Initiative for Social and Economic Rights. This is an NGO which deals basically with the realization of socio-economic rights like the right to education, right to health, among others. Musa recently, together with his team, authored a very interesting report about the 8 key strategies or the reasons as to why the schools in Uganda should open. That was authored in August 2021. And I believe that report goes a long way in interrogating the question of how the education has been handled in the COVID-19. I've also been joined by a young lady from Nairobi, Kenya, Shannon Mujera. Shannon Mujera is the team leader of the National Christian Students Association in Kenya, but also she's a former guild president of Strathmore University, which is one of the best performing universities, not just in Kenya, but in East Africa. She has been at the forefront of advocating for the reopening of schools in Kenya. And I think they are doing well, so we shall be sharing some of those experiences. Shannon, thank you so much for joining us. We hope to learn so much from you and from the land of the partially free in Kenya. We have also been joined by a distinguished mother, parent, and Christian minister, Miss Jack Barlow. So before we went on air, her name is Jack, Jacque. So those of you who did history, didn't dodge classes, Jack is you remember how to pronounce Jean-Jacques Rousseau. She says she's not related in any way, but we are joined by her. She has been very vocal to push for the reopening of schools. And she has gone through not just the pushing of schools, but she has borne the experience of dealing with young people, children who she has had to be with from 2020 to 2021. Thank you so much for joining me, ma'am. And we shall be joined later on by Megan Manso, and I will introduce her when she joins us. But she's a former district education officer in Florida. That's in the United States. She has written extensively on the reopening of institutions vis-a-vis the freedom of worship. She has also gone ahead to author a lot of material digressing the question of using masks and how they are a failure, they are irrelevant in terms of dealing with the COVID-19 and how dangerous mask mandates are to children. And tonight, that's the panel that is joining me. Now, just to have a little context of our discussion, before I can have our panelists join us, in 2020, the president of Uganda, on the 18th of March 2020, declared the first lockdown in Uganda, and he gave the schools 2 days to shut down. With those mandates, we saw that I was recently reading the report by the Ministry of Education, which stated that over 73,000 learning institutions were closed in Uganda. We had over 15 million learners in Uganda sent back home. We had 600,000 refugees, students who are studying in our institutions who were sent back home. I was also going through Mugoya's statistics under his report, where he stated that we had 542,192 teaching staff who were sent back home and 188,000 non-teaching staff who were sent back home. Now, you will remember that under the Education Act of Uganda 2008, the government of Uganda has a legal obligation to ensure that it provides the basic services such as curriculum development, making sure that it structures the education system appropriately. We have seen a few efforts by the government of Uganda as of I think it was March this year, where they reopened partially, and then in June 2021, they fully closed again. So we have many students who have gone back, who are still at home. Earlier this week, or last week, November 1st, the institutions, academic institutions were opened. Now we have seen very sad stories where we have universities which have refused to allow students to access the university premises. Specifically, we have seen them enforcing vaccine mandates. We have seen that with YMCA in Uganda, which I think is a tertiary institution. We have also seen Chambogo University, which has denied students the freedom to access their premises. We also chanced on a letter by the Law Development Center, which is the bar institution which trains lawyers in Uganda, threatening young lawyers not to access their bar course if at all they haven't taken the vaccine. We have seen on a wider scale institutions impose vaccine mandates. For example, the National Development, I think it's the National Drug Authority, there was a letter authored by their spokesperson, Shilandu Huchile, who said that no one will be allowed to access premises. We have seen also the Minister of Health of Uganda, Honorable General Acheng, chest thumping and saying that no one will be allowed to access the Ministry of Health premises without a vaccine. Strategically, we have also seen the Ministry of Education in Uganda also beginning to impose these mandates. Recently, there was a very disturbing development where the State Minister of Education, Dr. Jesse Muyingo, made a statement. I think she was in Mbarara opening up the institute, and he was surveying the reopening of the readiness of the institute to allow students to come in. And he noted that no one should be allowed to access the university premises. Actually, he said all schools in Uganda without being vaccinated. Now, such statements are the ones which are beginning to shape this particular discourse, and I will allow my panelists to begin weighing in. I'll just begin with you, Abubakar Matanda. You are going into the courts of law now. You are a judicial officer. You have been at the political front of fighting for the fundamental rights of the citizens. But right now I want to pose a question to you as a lecturer of students at the Islamic University of Uganda. What has been your experience in the time when the schools were closed down between 2020 and 2021?
Okay, thank you very much, Simon, and it's an honor for me to be part of this.
Sorry, I think we had just a few interruptions with
You ask, and I'm answering, I wear many hats, but I'm happy that you're asking that I answered this. Am I clear now?
Yes, we hope now
Am
you
I
can.
clear now? Looks
Yes.
like you had lost me. Okay, thank you very much. So I was saying that I wear many hats, but I like that you have started from the hat of a lecturer. And I should say maybe I will start with how this has affected me as an educator. So when we went into the first lockdown, I had actually just started lecturing and I had not even received my first salary. So for purposes of context, earlier on I had resigned from a position of being in a law firm and decided to give more of my time to education. And so just when I started lecturing, not even a month into my lecturing, we went into the lockdown. What that meant was that I did not have a stable source of income. And so I had to find my way around surviving. That's at a personal level. But on the other hand, shortly after, the university became creative and they introduced what we call Godless, which is a system of teaching online. I quickly realized that out of the 4 streams, and each stream for the class I was teaching has about 60 students. And so if you're talking about 4 streams, those are about 240 students. The maximum I ever had, and now of course, since it was online, we decided to combine all these streams. Physically, we would have them split up, but now they were all combined into one class. But I do not remember any moment, and that's up until now, when we had more than half of the students in class. And so the question at the back of my mind was always, where are the rest of the students? Now, even for the students we had, I think that the quality of instruction, I observed very fast that the quality of interaction I would have with the students was very different from what I had when we were having physical classes. And it was very easy to see that if in a class of about 80 students, you feel it as an instructor that you're moving with only about maybe 20 students. Because at certain points, as a check, as an instructor, I call out names of students, but then you realize they are not there. And then some of them respond, but just as we are having struggles with the network here, you can hardly hear them, and they keep raising issues, we cannot hear you. And so moving from numbers, even for those who try and join, you could clearly see that there are challenges of network, there are challenges of focus. There are many cases. I've had so many cases in my classes when you start hearing conversations that show that the particular learner has just plugged in, but they are not following what is going on. And so in my view, I think that very soon we are going to see from the quality of the products, because graduations have kept happening in the country, and I'm speaking at a very high level, the level of the university. I think that very soon we are going to have half-baked products on the scene. So far, from my own personal story, you can see that one, we have had some level of interruptions of employment and loss of employment. 2, that we have already seen dropouts. For my own class, I could see that it was more than 50%. 3, you can see that the quality itself for the learners who are there has been impacted greatly. And 4, you can see that if there were inequalities before this lockdown, for which we know that they were there, the lockdown has simply worsened them.
All right, just one quick follow-up question. Matanda, you lecture at an Islamic-based institute, a university. How has this, the closure of the schools, because at the Islamic institution, you teach the Islamic worldview. How has the closure actually specifically affected the the value system, the Islamic value system of the way you're raising up your children. I want you to speak to it from the religious, context. How has this affected the value system of the products that you're now talking about, which are going to be half-baked?
Yes, of course, and I like that you asked that question because shortly after we had started having those online classes, there are some questions that came up. For example, students at the Islamic University in Uganda follow a certain code that is based on Islamic teaching. For instance, the female students, while at campus, veil. Now, we had incidences of online classes where you'd have someone who has their profile picture when they may be dressed in a mini skirt or they are not veiling, and or someone attending class when they're not veiling. And so the question was, what happens? Do we throw them out of the online class, or do we understand that they are plugging in from wherever they are at home? And so, we let that be. And so I could say that for an Islamic setting that seeks to, on top of teaching the curriculum, because the curriculum we teach is the normal, usual Ugandan curriculum, but alongside it, it comes with aspects of the faith. Now, those aspects are seen through some things like attending prayers, things like they mentioned the dressing, things like having what we would call seminars to fellowship at campus. Of course, none of those things now has been going on. And so to answer your question, you definitely see that we are now operating on the bare minimum. If you can be able to deliver some content to the learner, well and good.
So you think actually that with the introduction of virtual education, there has been a degradation of the values, the religious values?
And I hope it doesn't happen, but I anticipate that in the future, many of these young friends of ours give you a job because the impression is that perhaps you're not fully baked. So you cannot take away the grave, dire consequences that it will have on many of the students in school now. Now, government has continued to argue that it is better to be alive. And you had, I think, one of the leaders saying pregnancy is okay as long as you're alive. I think some of these statements are made at a level where people perhaps are not appreciative of the direct kind of effect that COVID-19 has had on families and has had on students in school. Or they seem to speak from a highly elevated level of appreciation of bigger issues and forget to really come down to the smaller issues that actually matter to the ordinary Ugandan. So government could be right or wrong. A discussion we are still all trying to internalize and understand, but I be very insensitive, especially in these last stretches of the COVID impact in terms of how they communicate what they are doing or what they are not doing. And that has greatly affected their ability to give the nation direction or have it and have the citizenry understand them or get persuaded by the different policies that they are undertaking. Certainly, you must feel pity for the student who is in school right now. It's a very different kind of playing environment they are in, and the parents at that. But well, we've heard that they might open fully in January. I think it is also important for all of us not to stretch the frustration, the despair, the agitation of the students. We need to give them hope. We need to assure them that they can come out of this, and we need to facilitate for them an environment where they have full confidence in themselves that they can still make it, they can still achieve their dream despite the time they've lost.
All right, and just a follow-up question on that. I'm just reading through the profile of the Uganda Youth Network, which you are the executive director. It says that you're committed to build, empower, and sustain a vibrant youth network through advocacy, coordination, and capacity building. I like the aspect that you talked about of rejuvenating the hope amongst the young people and the students. Now, just take you on this front as the executive director of the Uganda Youth Network. One of the aspects of the approach that you use to advance for the freedoms and the rights of the young people is advocacy. Mr. Jothan, the recent reports are extremely worrying, where we see students who have lost 2 years coming back to school, and on coming back to school, they are being told by the university or the institutional authorities that they will not access their universities. That's number one. But number two, which is much more challenging, and I want to speak specifically to this, the government of Uganda has previously imposed restrictions on the freedom of worship. They're specifically saying that they can only allow 200 people to gather, all right, in places of worship. Children are not allowed, and the elderly are not allowed. Now, I just want to reconcile this position. We have institutions of learning which have opened up, and some of these institutions of learning are centers or they have places of worship. And these places of worship, which are meant to contribute to the value system of the students, are still under restriction. Do you actually think that these particular restrictions can still be realized, that they're still relevant, especially speaking to the fact that they could potentially destroy the freedom of worship for the students who need it, the harmony, the discipline, the peace that comes with them gathering together. How do we reconcile the position of opening up places of, opening up academic institutions, and yet places of worship which operate within academic institutions are still closed?
Thank you, Simon. I noticed that I had a feeling you would not miss out on how you integrate the church issues within our discussion. Mm-hmm. But that being said, first of all, I wish that we had somebody from government, perhaps would have been in a better place to answer some of these questions, and then we can interrogate their answers. But from my perspective, we really have to appeal to the citizens at an individual basis to take responsibility in terms of how they guard themselves from this whole virus. These issues of government, 200 people, G50 at first, G20, many parts of the world have since moved on. Yes, in many other cases, you hear the resurgence of the virus and things like that. But what is clear across the world is that COVID-19, until you're vaccinated, I have had in UK recently, there is a pill that is being, given a trial to see if you can do medication. So until those are achieved, you have no choice but to actually now move on. Mm-hmm. That is open up and let systems get back in normalcy. Mm-hmm. Again, the president in his most recent communication said in January they'll open up fully. So we have November, we have December, and then January. The worrying issue is that there are many things that this government has said they will do, but have, when time reaches, have failed to do. Mm-hmm. So the confidence in the citizens in what the president says or promises might not be to the desired level. But Simon, the question that you ask, whichever way I look at it, whether it's justified or not, whether it can be reconciled or not, if we are to take the president for his word, I believe we've been able to take in so much time already, and even when a month or two can, add something quite fundamental, but we've held on for some time. Maybe we can hold on for some more time. Mm-hmm. For the sake of staying alive and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll now just talk about presidents and the actions of the presidents and what they have done. I just want to, just the neighboring country over here in Kenya, and I'll bring in here my sister Shannon. The president of Kenya came out and said, I am lifting all curfew, policies within Kenya. Let the people go back and enjoy themselves, seeking, to protect the night economy, the schools enjoying their freedoms. I just want us to get a feel, maybe from a comparative level from Kenya. Shannon, what is the experience like in Kenya in regards to the people enjoying, first of all, their general, their fundamental freedoms, both of education and worship?
Okay, thank you so much, Simon. So maybe just to give it a bit of context, in Kenya, we experienced our first case in March of last year, March 15, and I think 2 days later, the president also announced that all schools should be closed. And it was like a couple of weeks before actually discussions with the Ministry of Education began. What they had actually proposed is like they just canceled the entire
sorry, Shannon, you just got a hiccup.
academic year, because here schools start from January to November. That's a whole academic year. But then now, like in between that period, a lot of stakeholders, including parents, even church leaders from here. So it was like a call from everyone, because the effects of the consequences of actually letting learners stay at home were greater than even, because the constant argument is like you can revive an economy or something else, but you cannot always revive a life. And seeing what other countries did, like let's say Taiwan or what the other Malaysia, the other countries, and you compare to even the situation here in Africa, in Kenya, you'd see that people have a better argument of of letting the learning institutions stay open and the students going back to school. So I think even with that there was constant concern from all the different stakeholders, going to government, writing letters, trying to speak out on media. So it was a concerted effort, like from different stakeholders, to even let the curfew, even for the issue of the curfew, because it was really there was no need of it. People were seeing how it's affecting their businesses. The positivity rate was actually reducing, and so there was actually no need of curfew, even though the Ministry of Health would say like cases are increasing and like the effects of COVID, but clearly on ground you'd see whatever they're saying and what is on ground is totally different. So I think that the kind of concerted effort and the pressure from the different stakeholders is actually what push the president, and even now in the political election period. So it's actually what pushed the president as well to lift the curfew. And currently, the economy is 24 hours. Most of the people are reviving their businesses because the economic levels here were actually quite bad. Many people lost their jobs, their businesses as well. And even the students, in terms of schooling, that kind of, it was a period, I think 6-7 months. So many of them had a lot of issues, mental health, and the separation of not being able to socially connect, it devastates people, and especially in terms of their religious and spiritual life, because you find in most of these schools, boarding schools, even universities, is where you can be able to grow together spiritually, and because it's a more of you're trusting in a higher power than yourself. So it makes you able to grow individually and instill the values that you need to grow as a wholesome person. And like when when the schools were shut down, people were isolated, and you'd see many people becoming suicidal. And even for me, as being the guild president, I really used to receive many cases about. We had several suicide cases even within my university, and we had to come together as we have a council of presidents, like for guild presidents within the country. We personally did press conferences. We wrote to the president regarding reopening of schools, about lifting down of the curfew, because the impacts it had were greater than the COVID cases itself, because the positivity rate was quite low. Because I think even right now, with everything being opened, and I see even with the cases in Uganda, when the schools were closed, actually the positivity rate was around, I think, 2.8 or something of the sort. But right now, with all schools reopened, the cases are very minimal, and actually the positivity rate in young children, like from 4 to 18 years, is actually quite low, less than 0.6%. So it's actually just more of a lie. I think that the politicians or the leaders actually used to say that they're trying to protect the young future, maybe of Uganda and maybe Kenya. But the truth is, even with the schools being reopened, the cases are actually very low. There's very, like, maybe you can have 1 or 2 cases in a school, but like it has never gotten to an extent of like an entire school closing down because of COVID. And it's been like schools resumed officially last year in September. Yeah, that was for maybe candidate classes, but now the academic year has been restored. But now the terms are a bit shorter, just to cater for the lost time. So I think now we are still trying to catch up on the lost time, because people, at least they saw it a bit later on, but at least now the schools are reopened and the economy is trying to revive back to itself. And it's actually a proof that it's actually more like a hoax, because the COVID cases have actually been decreasing, even with with curfews lifted, because people would think that more people would get COVID, but that's actually not the case. The positivity rate has drastically reduced, and even in terms of people wanting to, or like in terms of even vaccinations and all that, people are not. I would say like they are not. they're not, we're not being forced in terms of vaccinations, like being mandated, because they can see the positivity rate is reducing, and the whole idea of COVID being such like the kind of magnitude they put on it has actually been discredited, because we can see, we have the facts, we have the figures, things are actually better than before.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shannon, I mean, I'm just looking at a report here from Reuters. Reuters is an international news agency talking about the statistics in Kenya with, the positivity rates, as you've said, they are going low. The infection rates are quite higher as compared to Uganda. But there's something I'm picking from you. The experiences in Kenya, number one, is that positivity rates are lower, infection rates are actually higher as compared to Uganda, but your schools are actually opened. All right, there is no restriction whatsoever. But secondly, something I wanted you to speak to now as a leader, as a team leader of the, for the National Christian Students Association in Kenya, about the efforts of restoring hope amongst the young people, because now you are on a partially positive rate of opening up the institutions. Now, as a students association, a Christian Students Association, what are the strategic efforts that you are making in regards to restoring hope amongst the learners in Kenya, given that you have a chance of reopening?
So thank you, Simon, for that. So, as the National Christian Students Association, we are literally the body that brings all students together and in accordance to the Christian faith and values. So we see we play a very critical role, because personally we've been students, we are students in the present, because unlike maybe other stakeholders, we are the ones who understand maybe the position of the learners or the students at the moment. So it's about just bringing all the different stakeholders from the Ministry of Education, from the parents, the teachers, or bringing everyone together. So currently what we're doing, we are running different programs in schools. So we're trying to set a base even for the learners, and also bringing the other stakeholders to understand maybe the kind of foundations that the learners would actually need, because we've been there in the present, so we have a better understanding and view of what maybe a learner and a student would need at this present time, and just share it out with all the other stakeholders for them to also understand and to be in oneness, to know that these are the kind of values they need to be instilled in the young person as of now in the present age, and also to be able to ensure that policies and other guidelines maybe are set in a particular way that would favor the current growth and prospects of the learner. So I think that's very important as a Christian.
All right, Shannon, I think, sorry, your internet got a little disruption. But at this point, I just want to bring in Musa. So Musa, your team and yourself have just authored a report in August 2021 concerning the 8 key reasons as to why the education system in Uganda should open. Maybe we should have a little background to this. The UNICEF has declared how dangerous it was for the nations. Actually, quoting the words of the Secretary General of the United Nations, he said the closure of the schools is the biggest ideological and social catastrophe that the world has suffered. So the UN seems to be saying that school closures is not actually the best option. World over, schools have opened up, many of them unconditionally. In Uganda, we have broken a world record of being the country which has locked down schools longest. As of last week, it was 77 weeks of closure. So right now we may be about 78 weeks of closure. So UNICEF seems to say, or UNICEF and UN say, school closure is dangerous. The nations that we keep on citing, the United Kingdom, US, have opened up, and I hope that Megan can join us to tell us about the experience of Florida. And here we are in Uganda, still closed down. And those who have opened up are denying students to access the institutions. In your report, you talk about the widening inequality. The first point you say as to why schools should be opened is that there is a widening inequality in areas of quality education. And you specifically talk about the questions of internet access and its efficiency, the failure of the government to plan, to have a clear education plan. I know that your organization has also authored a report I think it was about, the report was called COVID-19 money and where did it go? And you talked about the supplementary budgets that were passed by Parliament and how these monies were misused. I want us to speak about the question of the widening inequality and how it has actually been a big basis of destroying education, and why is this a key reason as to why schools should fully open up?
Thank you very much, Simon, for this opportunity to have a discussion with the colleagues regarding matters of education. First, from the onset, I want to say that COVID-19 didn't find us in a good shape as far as equality in access to education is concerned. I'll give you, you have been seeing, for example, reports in the media whenever results are back about issues to do with the performance of up-country schools. But also, I think when you read even assessments done by, for example, UNEB itself in terms of learning, and even other NGOs like UWEZO, they were establishing that learning was very low, especially for up-country countries. And this assessment is mainly in issues, areas to do with the literacy and the numeracy. Just reading a simple sentence, solving a simple mathematical question, it was very low. And when, of course, COVID-19 set in, a number of learners, when you look at, for example, government data, it will show that primary education has about 8.8 million learners. I somehow doubt that data, but let us go with it for purposes of the discussion. And out of that data, out of that number, close to 6 million are in UPE schools. Now, the same government reports, especially by UBO, says that close to 92% of the schools in Uganda have no access to internet. Now, if 91% of schools in Uganda don't have access to internet, you can't expect those children to have internet in their respective homes. Because for a long time, learning has gradually been taking place. Formal learning has been taking place in the school setting. So when COVID-19 set in, government said we'll implement the continuing learning program. And under that program, it indicated that some learners will receive self-study materials. They printed around those materials which they printed could only cover around 25% of the learners. But there were no materials which were braille materials to cater for the blind. Then they went ahead and said that they will have to conduct lessons on radio and television. Now, the recent Uganda National Household Survey 2019-2020 shows that access ownership to radio sets in Uganda has reduced from 45.2% to 31.7% among households. So this particular arrangement is premised on the fact that for its effectiveness, they assume that every household should have a radio station or a television set. But now data is showing that not even 50% of the population has. UBO's data is telling us that only 31% of the population have that data. So what happens is that, and you see there is another point which I should speak to, there is a difference between ownership and functionality. I may have a radio set, but when it is not functioning, why? I don't have device sales. During this period when people are struggling to find what to eat, you can't tell them to prioritize buying device sales as opposed to buying food for the family. And even when they were distributing the self-study materials, priority was given to areas which they considered to be poor, which had already been established to be poor areas by the previous data. So the self-study materials went to communities like maybe Karamoja. But me and you know that this COVID-19 mainly affected the urban poor, the people who live hand to mouth. These are brothers and sisters of ours who go to town, These ones that you usually find on the taxi stages saying one day, and they in position to get 10,000 and go away. Public transport was also closed, so that person was not earning anything, and you're telling that person either to get units of electricity such that the child can continue learning on television or get dry cells. So what we established that for people who have the money, that have been in a position to get teachers to teach their children in their homes, or to subscribe to particular arrangements. For example, maybe some schools here, some high-end schools have been having Zoom classes, and those ones are the few. The majority, as I've told you, close to 6 million who are in UPE schools are not getting any learning at all. And you see, we may take, as of now, I think that the impact of COVID-19 may not be so adverse immediate. Of course, even for anyone with any objective mind can see whatever we are going through. UNICEF has established that the continued closure of schools across globally, it risks close to out of 100, it risks 25 learners, I mean girls, to get pregnant. And also the chances of those people to get back to school are very low, because in most cases, the moment the child conceives is given out, and that is child marriage. So the widening inequality is just being exacerbated, and government itself in its own documents has established that the whole arrangement of continued learning is so ineffective. Minister of Finance did that report, and it based on the issues to do with the access to internet, but also the fact that you're telling a primary 3 child to attend a class on radio. First of all, the concentration capacity, the parent is not there to supervise, but also even when the child wants to get any clarification, there is no opportunity for that. The lessons are the child is just there seeing a teacher on radio, and the teacher is assuming that the people I'm talking to are listening to me and they're understanding. These ones cannot also, there is no that feedback mechanism is not available.
Sorry, Musa, I just want to pose a question to you. I was recently reading a report that was developed by the College of Humanities, one of the professors at the College of Humanities from Makerere University, saying that actually the whole aspect of virtual learning and the school closures has specifically affected the aspect of religious education. Now, you are a researcher. I don't know how much of, I don't know whether you've interested yourself in realizing or in digging out information. And I want you to speak to that issue. How the whole aspect of virtual learning actually ends up affecting the aspect of religious education, because you guys have done very amazing research that speaks to these issues. What is your specific comment to that?
The research which we have done has not gone deep to establish, for example, when you're doing research, you collect a lot of data, but at the end of the day, when you're sitting to read the report, there are things that you leave out. I should say maybe those are one of the reasons which we left. Those are some of the things that we left out when we were writing the report. But I should tell you that during the collection of the data, we would interact with the teachers, we would interact with the parents. And even when we were still studying, formal education is attached to religion. Actually, if, for example, you look at ownership of schools in Uganda, majority of schools in Uganda are owned by non-state actors, are owned by the church, by the mosque. They are the biggest owners of the schools in Uganda. So even, for example, for UPE and use, majority of the founding bodies it is the church, it is the mosque. So what happens is that learners get an opportunity, one, of going to the church or the mosque when they are in school, but also they get chance when they are at school to get extra lessons, which are extra religious lessons, as an arrangement of the school administration. Now that one is not happening. So obviously, I should say that is one of the areas which have been adversely affected. There is no access to mosques, and even with the limitations that came up now to say, if you're coming to the mosque, you should come this number of people. If you're coming to the church, you should come this number of people. What happens that is only the adults who will go, and the children will be left back home.
Okay, thank you very much, Mugwe. I just want to now come back to the parents. Sorry, we had got disconnected. But Pastor Jack, you had mentioned something which was very interesting and ties into what Mugwe is saying, the school ownership in Uganda. Just a few statistics here. In 1904, 05, and 06, some of the best schools were established in Uganda. Namiryango High School opened in 1901 by the Hill Fathers, which was a Christian missionary aspect. Mengo High School, specifically designed for boys, 1904 was opened by the Missionary Society. We had Gayaza High opening up in 1905 and King's College Budo opening up in 1906. Pastor Jack, you left before we had talked about, you were trying to bring in the aspect of the value system inculcated by especially the religious, the religious-based institutions and how that has been destroyed by the whole aspect of virtual learning. What exactly are we missing, or what exactly are some of these religious-based institutions missing when you are, you abdicate the role of physical learning and you become comfortable with only the virtual learning? What exactly do we get to miss with that kind of setup?
Thank you, Simon. I'm glad that, like you've referred, that the previous speaker has touched the link between church and schools. And we know that that is not an accident, that is not a coincidence. You'll find that if it's a Christian family, they raise their children based on Christian values. They take them to a church so that those values are reinstated and even given better context in light of the scriptures, the word of God. Then they will take those children to a Christian school to further cement those foundations, those belief systems. And why is that important is that if you can shape a child in a particular direction, like I said earlier, you'll find that that child, when they grow into an adult, will not deviate very much from what they were taught. Of course, you'll have the one-off layers, who go off and what. But those are few of them. The majority remain shaped by what they were taught as children. And for me, that's the risk I see, that when you close churches or when you open up churches and say only 200 people are going to attend, like the previous speaker has spoken, what happens? The children get left home. So we are breeding a generation. Literally, what I see us doing by closing, keeping the children out of churches, out of schools, is creating a godless society. And what are we doing in creating a godless society is breeding a group of people or a generation that is going to create a lot of crime because they've not developed a sense of a supreme authority, the deity, whatever that deity may be, if it's going to be Allah or God, and a sense of accountability. No values, spiritual values have been passed on, Christian values have been passed on. People who have no respect for authority, that is something that is inculcated in schools and in church. Children grow up knowing there is authority in life in the different stages that we are, and the importance to listen and submit to that authority. Now, if all of that, if the children are supposed to go to churches, they're not supposed to go to school, guess what? They're growing up without a sense of authority. Probably the only authority they're left with in their lives is their parents. So what happens when they step out of the homes? Now we can be unruly, we can do whatever we want. Who are you speaking to me, telling me what I should and should not do? Because these things have been killed at the level at which they should be developed, in the churches and in the school setting. So it's a big, like somebody said earlier, that what we are breeding right now is something that is going to come back and hit us later on. And again, like earlier said, I think it's important that as individual Ugandans, we wake up to the sense of responsibility of the raising of our children. We need to wake up and appreciate why we take children to church, why do we take them to the Christian schools or to the Muslim schools that we do, and be able to defend that right for the children and speak up. I mean, the lady from Kenya told us that the parents came together, the children councils came together, you know, and all spoke to the government and got the government to see the importance of having these facilities running, because they're actually, some of them are even more essential than what we've called essential. At the end of the day, it does not help if you have a person that is working and has no character. Because guess what? The money that is going to be made is going to be stolen, because that person, the value system of being faithful or trustworthy that would or should have been built in the church setting or in the school setting was never developed. So yes, you have a mentally educated person, but with zero character, zero value system. And what is that? It's a godless society, it's a wasted generation, which we are creating.
All right, let me just, thank you very much for that. And I just want to remind all those who are watching us right now to please make sure that you keep on sharing the hashtag on your different Twitter spaces, the different social media platforms. You can follow this conversation on the End Lockdown page, which is on Facebook, and on Twitter, the hashtag is hashtag End Lockdown Now. And we have a lot of media engagement, and I can see the comments coming in. Thank you very much. I just want to bring in the youth leader here. Jothan, you are the person who is the leader of the Uganda Youth Network. I've just been looking at the annual crime report of the Uganda Police Force of April 2021. And they were saying that the highest crime rates were committed, especially by the young people. Most of the young people have been locked out of the schools, many of whom not only being locked out of schools, but many of whom have been locked out of the centers, which would call centers of rehabilitation, like again places of worship. And the police report actually attributes a lot of this to, you know, the failure of the key stakeholders like religious institutions to support. But here you are, the youth leader of the nation. The report is implicating majority of the young people to be leading in crime. And then we have the key centers, which would have been, or the alternative centers of rehabilitation, still closed down. You talk about families, most families are strained because they have been, you know, think about what shall I eat next. Most of the jobs, young people have been laid off. The schools and the institutions in their schools, many of them haven't yet reported back. So the alternative place or the alternative mechanism that I'm sure I would appreciate to help you deal with issues of crime are the places of worship, which are still under lock and key, so to say. There's just a partial reopening. How far is this actually affecting the work that you have to execute and the mandate that you have to execute and the general image of the young people in this nation, because they're the biggest demographic in Uganda?
Again, thanks a lot, Simon. Before COVID-19, still in my view and in the views of many people that have come up with statistics that speak to my view, the situation in the country regarding young people was not good, you know. So COVID-19 has actually made that situation even worse. Like you just noted, we already had an unemployment issue, and now very many young people are still being laid off. Very many young people are the ones involved in the small enterprise, informal kind of businesses that were closed in the first, second lockdowns. So they've been hit hard, and it doesn't help that we are generally a youthful country. So if anything, inevitably would have to be affected as young people. Now, your question, for one to understand it, they would first of all, because you might face the danger of seemingly saying there shouldn't have been any lockdown or whichever. So the first thing to appreciate is that first, there should have been indeed a lockdown so that the people responsible, and that is government, can have time to prepare on how they are going to deal and manage the pandemic that we had, we're interfacing for the first time with. Now, whether after that this whole process has been handled in the right sense or not, in the short term, clearly, there is a lot of complaints from everywhere, even amongst the youthful population, among the students, and understandably so. But I think only time ahead will be able to let us know who handled this COVID situation well and who didn't, in my opinion. So, and this is why, Simon, the other time I was telling you that we needed to concentrate on how we move forward now. Yes, churches play a key role in trying to, like, I don't know, her name escaped me, our mama from USA, that the churches help in orienting the youthful mind, not just the youthful mind, even elders, into a mindset that keeps them disciplined, that keeps us orderly, and situations like that. Inevitably, crime has to go up because of the frustrations and apathy within the population. The young people are the ones facing the unemployment issues and being laid off, so clearly they would have to be engaged in that kind of angle. But the solution is much more bigger than the opening of lockdown. Opening is part of the solution, but the bigger solution is that we need to start, because if they are going to say open fully in January, in my opinion, in my assessment, I believe that we are late in trying to talk to the citizenry, trying to talk to young people about how it's not necessarily going to be easy to recover from this situation, but how we need to be resilient, how we need to be committed to the struggle of picking ourselves back. I believe that we are not hearing so much voice around that. We are keeping stuck in the area of complaining and agitating, and I believe that we are losing focus on what should be the area that we should concentrate on most. And that would also help in terms of curbing crime. Yes, I hear you. On the issue of churches, there is absolutely no doubt that these are centers that in a very fundamental way help in managing the frustrations of people. If you don't go to church often, you might undermine the contribution that these centers make to keeping our citizenry sober, disciplined, and orderly. So there is, and it doesn't make sense that they are, yes, the Chikubo and what you hear people saying that, but those are always in transit and things like that. But I believe that actually those are the ones that carry the virus even more than the ones that are stationary, because the argument is that in church people are stationary and they are in one place and things like that. But the argument doesn't sit well with logic. So for and even at the institutions of higher learning, you're opening, yes. Perhaps under their platform, the Interreligious Council, because I have not had them, especially the church leaders at the top, really come out aggressively like many of you who have coalesced their voices around, since there is that gap, to really agitate in an aggressive manner, in a logical manner, like you're arguing for the opening of these worship centers. So at that level, I don't know what kind of engagements they've had. Maybe perhaps it forms logic to them, but I agree with you that keeping the centers of worship closed, I think there is no logic in it at this point in time. Yeah.
All right, just one.
And just to add on a bit, there is, it could have been quite a seemingly lame argument about the entertainment industry, how it works most in December. Not just the entertainment industry, all businesses seem to do well in that festive period. So if you're going to open in Jan, I think you can still open, at the beginning of December, so that you give people a lift in terms of picking up, in terms of their financial state and things like that. And also perhaps if you opened churches and you are able to have a discussion with them, they would prepare the population for the next year within the month of December, which isn't going to be an easier at all cost. So if they use the December month to do a lot of mindset orientation and preparation, we could be served well as a nation in a broader sense.
All right, thank you very much, Jothan. Now, just to bring in Matanda, talking about a particular issue, and I like what Jothan said, using the main time as a period of reorientation. The concept of super spreaders. Now, schools, at the time of the closure of schools, in the first speech of the president, and if you read the speech of June 2021 and May 2021, the president kept on insisting that there are places categorized as super spreaders, among which included schools, places of worship, market areas, the likes of Chikuwa and other trading areas. He talked about the aspect of super spreaders, but most interesting, he never provided any statistics of what this, as we like to call it, this animal called super spreaders actually is. Do you still think that, using Jothan, borrowing from Jothan's words, does this argument still sit well with logic that there is a concept called super spreaders which should still be sustained to keep the economy partially opened up, or even for some areas totally locked down, like the entertainment areas?
Yes, thank you very much. And I smiled when my brother said it doesn't sit well with logic. An interesting expression there. But maybe to answer this question, I would start from the point of saying that from where we started last year, I think that nobody would blame anyone or any country for taking different measures, because COVID-19, the pandemic hit the whole world, and by then we had very little knowledge about it, and people were dying in throngs. In some countries like Italy, it was really sad. And so any country that took steps to see that they check the pandemic could be excused, even if some of those steps didn't turn out to sit well with logic or science, if you will. I think that where we are right now, the same excuse cannot fly. Where we are right now, we know a lot of things about COVID-19, and the ways to deal with it are very clear. And whereas I'm not a scientist, I say this with the greatest of humility. I have read a number of studies which suggest that COVID-19 actually has very little impact on persons who are below 18. And personally, I had an opportunity last month to travel to Italy. And just from what I saw, of course I did not move in the whole country, but from what I saw and from the statistics I read online, it became clear to me that Italy was possibly hit because of their demographic. That whereas we have majority young people here, I could barely see a young person on the streets where I was in Milan. And so, what am I saying? What I'm saying is that I don't know why the science that the younger a person is, the more likely they are not to have big struggles with COVID, which I think is the reason why we manage the way we manage it. I don't agree with those who think that COVID did not hit us that hard, say as much as it hit Italy, because we were wise or because of the lockdowns. No. I think you could say by God's grace, we found ourselves in a position where we have a young population, and the impact is not as disastrous. So, to link this with your question of super spreader, I don't think, to answer your question directly, that it sits well with the logic. I don't think that schools as super spreaders. I agree with Yam that the places like Chikugo would actually qualify as greater super spreaders than educational environments. But to also speak to what Yam says, that we should use December as a month to prepare ourselves in all possible ways to deal with the challenges of COVID-19. You realize that many of us are pushing for opening of schools, and many of us are talking about the impact this has had on the learners, on the educators, but very few of us are discussing how we are going to recover from the other socio-economic ways through which the pandemic has hit us. For example, it is very evident that there are many school proprietors who have since moved on to other businesses, who have converted their premises into lodgings, who have moved to other businesses, and some have just gone under. There are also many teachers who have since moved on to other forms of income generation. And I suspect that some of them might have found out that they actually make better sense than teaching. We also know that many parents have had their sources of income go under. So as we talk about opening, I would expect the country and the leadership to be discussing how do you get, I think in business they usually call them stimulus packages or stimulus plans. How do you ensure that even when you open, that the schools still exist or they are supported to be resuscitated back, that parents are able to send back the learners to school, many of them their incomes have gone under, that teachers are able to be incentivized to get back to teaching. Yes, so I think part of the conversation around how we can use December or the period, the time we are left with to prepare, I have not yet seen a clear plan or even a semblance of it, or even a conversation around how we are going to make sure that when we eventually open, we shall be able to get back. But finally, Kenya, and our sister Shannon is here, she could advise us. I was in August when Kenya opened schools, I was reading about how they were approaching them. You know, desperate times call for desperate measures. I do not know where the conversation is for us to say, well, we have clogged the system, there are many learners who have now missed for over 3 years, and that means it cannot be business as usual. So how do we, for example, open up our town halls and community centers to offer some sort of emergency education? How do we attract back retired teachers and maybe even attract people who are not teachers but who can quickly be taken through refresher courses and they do teaching, such that we approach this whole thing as the emergency that it is. Otherwise, I can assure you, a few years down the road, 5-10 years down the road, the impact is going to be heavy on us. And I've also suggested as one of the ways to deal with this, because I predict this is an unscientific prediction, but I think that more than 40% of our learners have dropped out. They will not get back. How do we get them back? How do we, for instance, invest in technical and vocational education as a bridge to see that we can reconnect some people who have fallen through back into the system? Thank you, Simon.
All right, you talked about the comparative analysis. I want to bring in Shannon at this level. What lessons do you think, Shannon, that Uganda needs to learn from Kenya, especially in regards to the full reopening of all the aspects of the economy, and yet, your rates are high up there. In terms of COVID, Kenya seems to be much more worse than Uganda. What lessons do we need to learn as as Ugandans, as the Ugandan community, to push for the reopening of the economy?
Okay, thank you so much, Simon. And I think those are very good points that you've made, because I know Uganda, the schools have been locked for almost 2 years, and I think for us, it was going to be the same case if not for the pushback from the various stakeholders. And I think what I would advise, even for Uganda, as you prepare to open schools, there really has to be a united front from every stakeholder, from the parents to the teachers to even the religious leaders, even people from the church, everyone really has to come together to see how to like develop a strategic plan, because I know you've talked about the teachers now going to other other occupations, and even maybe the schools being shut down even completely. So those are very maybe unique challenges which are not per se here. So it would call for every stakeholder to actually just come together. You need like a united front, because I think even what helped us here is now that kind of unity, because everyone was seeing a common, it was a common goal, uniting the different stakeholders. That's why we were able to push back. Even the government had these discussions, do press conferences, and even like speak on to the people who are in charge directly, the ones who are making these decisions, for them to be able to, we sit down, have a level-head discussion with them.
Oh, okay. Sorry, your internet seems to have broken. I just want to bring in the research at this point. Musa, I wanted you again to speak to the aspect of comparative. You're the researcher, so you interpret with a lot of information. Let us speak to, nations like Tanzania did not lock down their countries. What are some of the lessons we draw from some of these nations? I know also Sweden took the same approach, the likes of Norway. I think also there was the like of Singapore, which never took the radical path of full closure of institutions. What are some of them? Because in the media, the media seems to only discuss those who closed down and opened up. They never seek to give attention to those who never took the path of total lockdown. What lessons for you as a researcher should the nation of Uganda learn from nations like Tanzania, which never locked down completely, Sweden, some states in the United States of America, the likes of Norway? What lessons do we learn from such nations?
I think very much, Simon, once again. First again, I want to emphasize that as far as education is concerned, we have really retrogressed on the educational outcomes that we had achieved. For example, if you look at the gender parity, issues to do with the child labor. Again, for example, child labor in Uganda, it reported that it increased from 28% to 43% as a result of this lockdown. What we should learn from countries like Tanzania, and it's what Matanda has spoken about, the effect, COVID-19 has less impact on young children. And there is no actually study to say that the young children are the most spreaders compared to the adults. It has been established, for example, for Tanzania. Though people say they have not been reporting, but at least there is no any data to show that, for example, there has been a lot of death among children below the age of 18 in Tanzania as a result of the schools remaining open. But we can actually take two examples. We can learn from the previous lockdown. When the previous lockdown happened and we commenced on the phased reopening of schools, I'm going to go to bring that together with the comparative analysis with Kenya. We did a rapid assessment of what was happening across the country, and we found out that one, for example, many government schools would not open with the standard operating procedures which had been issued if they had said maybe 4 classes should report back. We were short on teachers. Already by the time COVID happened, rather broke out, we had the first case here and we had the national closure of schools. The Ministry of Education data indicated that we had the teaching gap for primary schools alone. We had we had a staffing gap of 22,000 teachers. Then for secondary, most secondary schools were not even operating at 50% capacity. So what we learned from that we had less human resource and infrastructure to support the education system. And what should we learn from Kenya? And I agree with my brother Jotham that we are not doing effective planning. And as Vatanda said, the plan is not there. Look, when Kenya happened, and Kenya should give us a good example, and I think our neighboring sister can speak this, Shannon. With the recent opening of schools, there has been a lot of strikes and burning of schools. This whole period when the children have been at home, there is a lot of psychological trauma. Right now, Kenya is dealing with a huge challenge of strikes in schools. So the preparation should also include dealing with the psychological aspect of the learners. It's not simply an issue of waking up and say, go back to school. But how do we deal with that? The other thing actually is about infrastructure. I was listening to the president of Kenya. They were celebrating what we consider the Heroes Day. I'm forgetting how they call it in Kenya, but it's called the Heroes Day. And he issued a third economic stimulus. And part of that stimulus package that established that as a result of reopening, of full-scale reopening, they had a gap within the infrastructure of 10,000 classrooms. Now, when we did an assessment for after the first reopening from the first lockdown, we found out that many parents were getting their children, and it's what Abakar was talking about. Many parents were getting their children from private schools into public schools. And you'd ask them why, say, I can no longer afford to take a child to a private school. Right now, the option is at least to find any nearby UP school around, which is not as expensive as a private school, and I take my child there. So we should also be mindful of the fact that as a result of the impact of COVID-19, many parents are not able to pay school fees for their children, so they have to come back to government and take their children to government schools. The other point which we should also consider is to undertake an audit such that government can establish how many teachers are available, how many do we need, and find a way of either recruiting, and we have many qualified people who are capable of teaching. And if you look at the requirement in terms of salary, it may not even need maybe more than 60 billion to cover that gap. Though it will become a recurrent expenditure, and the government should be in position to cater for it. Lastly, government should now plan to undertake back to school campaigns as to ensure that those children are brought back into school. As I've indicated, many children have gone into child labor. You're telling a child right now, I come from a largely sugarcane growing area. You're telling a child who is now going to cut sugarcane and getting some money, and you're telling that person that please go back to school. If you don't sit with that child into a very good conversation and engage him or her on the benefits of education, it will be extremely challenging to tell him that, you know what, you live getting maybe 20,000 or 15,000 per day and go back to school where you not be earning but studying. So I think back to school campaigns will be effective, and this means, as I agree with what Shannon was saying, it requires a concerted effort of all stakeholders. I've indicated religious institutions are a key stakeholder in the education of Uganda. It is they are the ones who started from education here even before we were colonized officially, and up to now, most schools here, both private and even those ones that the government is relying on to offer UP and use government religious schools. So they should reach out to them, come up with a plan. Of course, we are already late, but if they can do anything, we can try to address whatever challenges that we may find when we wait for January. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I just want to now bring in the pastor here, because I like what Mugoya says, speaking to the role of the stakeholders in the push for the reopening of the schools. First of all, do you think, Pastor Jack, that you are, as parents in Uganda, are you doing enough to push for the reopening, the full reopening of academic institutions in Uganda?
Thank you for that. And I like the fact that you are actually challenging us as parents. How much are we doing in regard to the reopening of schools for our children. And to answer your question, Simon, directly, I feel like as parents, we've failed the children. We've not done enough. Not even done enough. I actually feel like we've not done anything. I think what has happened for Ugandans is that everyone is fending for themselves. You know, the few that can afford to do the online school and maintain their children on online school throughout this period of lockdown have taken care of their children. Now, those few, at the same time, are the people who form the voice that should move things in the nation, that should be able to inform the direction that the nation is going as far as the education of our children is concerned. Unfortunately, that class of people has focused on self and their own children. And the majority of the children in this nation who actually cannot afford, like the former speakers have already said, cannot afford the online school, have been forsaken, you know, as it were. There is no parent speaking for them. Everybody is just catering for themselves. And as we spoke earlier in the earlier town hall that we had, I think for me that is being very selfish and very myopic of those category or that category of parents, because these children that are doing online school or doing having teachers coaching them or whatever are not going to grow up in a vacuum. They're going to grow up with the same children in the same community with the same children that have lost 2 years of their school. And majority of whom, as you know, the previous speakers are speaking, are actually not going to be able to go back into school for one reason or another. So they're going to grow up in this same environment, and guess what? They're going to be a headache. So I feel that as parents, we have failed the children of this nation. We've not come up to defend their right to education, and we've just looked to our own interest. And just to sidestep from that, I think one of the things that I feel that has come out very strongly in our discussion is how do we prepare for the opening? First of all, should the opening wait till January? The difference between December and January, I really don't see it. I really don't see it. I actually agree with the previous speakers who have said it would be best to open now and prepare the ground so that as we begin a new year, some kind of shape has been taken. I mean, some gaps have been identified, probably plugged, or plans have been drawn on how to address some of the gaps that may not have been anticipated. So I feel that the opening should actually be brought to now so that by the time we get into the new year, some kind of momentum has been built. For us to wait until January is, to a greater extent, give up the first half of next year, if not the whole of next year, to also a loss, another loss, because then we'll be stumbling on this gap and on this gap and on the other gap, things that could have been mitigated or could have been fixed or plugged right now. And certainly for me, one of the takeaways, and I'm not concluding the speech, but one of the things that has come out strongly for me is that as churches, we need to strategically think on how to prepare the children in this period for the reopening of schools. How to get them motivated, to give them a sense of purpose, to give them hope for that child who had a dream to finish S6 at 18 and go to the university, do 5 or 6 years of medicine and become a doctor in the next 10 years, and right now feels like their dream has been lost because of the 2 years of school that have been, you know, thrown down the drain. How do you help that child to realize that their dream is not lost? That how do you motivate them? How do you inspire them to be able to pick themselves up and push and you know, continue with their dream and see to the attainment of their dream? So certainly the things that have been shared by the previous speakers have been very insightful, and that again for me reinstates the importance of actually opening churches and allowing these children to flow into the churches now so they can be emotionally and spiritually prepared to cope with the challenges they're going to face when they go back to schools.
No, that's very interesting. Now, I know that Jotham has kept on obviously dodging this part of the discussion, but just to bring you back here again, you run the Uganda Youth Network. The statistics of Uganda demonstrate that the biggest population in Uganda are actually religious, from different, religions and all that. I like what Pastor Jack talks about. She says that one of the ways, actually, to use the words, the most important thing that the places of worship, the religious institutions, ought to be doing to prepare students and learners for the next phase of their education cycle is to encourage them, restore hope. Do you agree with this kind of thinking, and how do you think it can even best be improved? Or if you depart from it, what do you think then should be done?
Thank you, Simon. But I was under the view that the former speaker actually borrowed that from where I started it, and they've simply broadened on that idea. Because I remember in my first submission, I emphasized the need to address what I think now should be the major discussion. How do we prepare ourselves after the pandemic? And I'm glad that many of the speakers that came after that agree with me on that, and have tried to make a contribution towards that kind of discussion. I agree with you, Simon. Churches play a big role in that agenda. And see, this is why I said that there can be a discussion with the top leadership of the different churches in their different kind of faith, with the government, and a kind of module is designed on how they tweak particular messages in these centers of worship to prepare the nation for the after effects. Because, you know, so many Ugandans out there are running, for the lack of a better word, crazy. They are frustrated, you know, and there is nobody really trying to drum the message of hope, the message of we can bounce back better. It will be hard, yes, but if we stay committed and are resilient, we can still make it out of the situation. That message is not loud. And it's not just about the centers of worship. Radio stations, UCC should engage the different stakeholders in our media. You do a news bulletin. Come on, at the end of it, remind Ugandans that yes, we've been hit by a pandemic none of us would have wanted, none of us saw coming, but we can get out of this in a better way. So we need to encourage very many people who have voices, very many channels that reach people, to start drumming the message of hope, the message of recovery. For me, yes, the question is fundamental. Perhaps we need to open as early as now. But in the event that this government continues to be stubborn and insistent and not listen to some of the advice being given by other stakeholders in this country and stick to January, cool. But let's prepare ourselves and prepare the population and the country using just church and all other areas. Even us as, like you noted, as ED, I interact with very many young people and even other stakeholders. Those of us that are alive to the need for this kind of message to start going out there. We need to come out of our comfort zones and be ready to do a little bit of an extra mile to try to prepare the population out of the situation, because they will open finally, but again you will hear Ugandans crying. The cries will be there, they are already there, but we need to tell Ugandans that we can make it out of the situation it has put us in. So yes, churches play a big role, just like all the other stakeholders. And indeed, Simon, for your benefit,
sorry, Jonathan.
I want to appeal
Jonathan, sorry, we lost you.
to the government to open churches now. Is that better, Simon?
And I didn't hear that very well. I just beg your pardon on that, Jonathan.
Yeah, I was saying, I don't know if Simon is playing a number on me trying to ensure I repeat this, but I repeat it. I want to assure you, Simon, that I agree with you. My submission has nothing entirely to suggest that I don't agree. The churches should have been open. as early as yesterday. They play a fundamental role in ensuring that our society keeps in check, especially at a trying moment like this one. So the different stakeholders, government, should actually be aware of what kind of partnership the church could contribute in refocusing the nation back to normalcy.
Right. Thank you very much, Jothan, and for the repeat. I love the repeat especially. But I just want us to go through a few comments as we get to conclude here. On our Facebook page, Teno Maria says, yes, how do we get back teachers who have left the industry for other industries? She says she co-owns a vocational school and they have lost 30% of the teaching staff and the non-teaching staff. Zuena Naloga says, the reasons why lessons cannot be taken from Sudan and Tanzania is there is no business when it comes to studying such nations. Sorry, I don't get this. Vaccination is a business and researching into these nations can lead to a shutdown to these industries. They have planned these business opportunities for such a long time. The behavior of countries like TZ and Sweden was not expected, so no funder is going to study. Oh, she seems to be speaking to the fact that the researchers like Musa are not interested in nations like Sudan and Tanzania because somehow the big pharma and big tech are making much more profit by pushing for the vaccination program. Diana Ahebwe says the places of worship are under lock and key. The parents are busy hustling to put food on the table. Who is caring for the children? No one. Jennifer Kugonza says the contribution of the church has been underestimated with a broken system that most African countries have. The church remains the only institution that is functional after the family. Paula Nachayuna says many students find comfort and security in schools. Open up. Moses Dukwago says, but there is no guarantee that in January the president will open up the nation. We can no longer trust politicians. I think we all, and I think this is factual. The president has come, before and said we shall open up when we are 1.5 million are vaccinated, then 2.5, then 4.8, then 7 million, then 12 million as of December. So there's been some level of inconsistency. Rebecca Agaba says places of worship and education institutions have been affected greatly and have remained closed longer than other institutions. Both also are tied into each other. In every education institution, you will find a place of worship within. Places of worship play a huge role. I don't know whether maybe to get factually correct, I think entertainment places have been closed longest, at least in the mind of the leader of the nation, but on the ground, we can have examples of what has been happening over the weekend. All right, Evelyn Mwasa says we need real stories and stats in Uganda on how badly the community has been hit by these continuous lockdowns and compare them to the so-called protection from COVID. And I think the research has not taken interest in this. Lisa Bijou says we need to be free. We can no longer be held up in bondage. Then Dana Major says that Uganda needs to borrow from Kenya's approach to put pressure on the head of state, the president. It really goes back to us. What are we doing? Hope Shida Businje says everyone must be involved. All sectors must be involved in getting the education ministry up and running. Oh yes, open church now. Aruho Elvis Dorin says, Jothan, you have a good point. Churches and places of worship play a fundamental role. Then Carol Tugume Sekandi, Jothan, looks like you have very many people here who love you. Churches should be opened up. Rebecca Agaba says that yes, no one is drumming the message of hope in the nation. The media is putting out bad news only. Why are we making plans but still discouraging the masses? There's a lot of good happening and good we are planning for. Places of worship should be open now and without restrictions because they are the major source of hope to the nation. And then Justin Bagonza says, thanks for sharing the Kenyan experiences. This is to Shannon. I hope the Ugandan education stakeholders are picking some lessons keenly. Kawesa Kevin says, children stand a 300% chance of being killed by everything else but COVID. It's simply unreasonable to make it a major case of closure of schools. I'll finalize with Rachel Kea Tuhaire, who says, schools need to be opened. A whole generation is being cheated and deprived of their right to education. And Clara Wakesa says churches are a place of hope. We need hope right now. And I think this is in resonance to all what has been said by all the different panelists. I just want to use 5 minutes for us to conclude this discussion. And I'll give each one at least 30 seconds to make their parting shot. And for us to reflect on what we have said, especially in regards to the full reopening of education centers, but also the broader category of the super spreaders. And I just want to begin with you, Mr. Jotham Nyamrebire, in 30 seconds to give us your parting shot.
Thank you, Simon. It's one of those rare occasions where I get to be number one, because my name usually makes me number last. But
is it like somebody who was YKT somewhere?
Yeah. But first of all, I want to note, not in a way of flattering you, Simon, but I have been to a number of these virtual engagements, and as an individual, personally, I feel I've benefited a lot from this discussion. But two, I actually feel we've done some bit of justice to the discussion that you presented us, and I thank all the other panelists. I go away feeling good, because I feel if there was any serious person following this engagement and can in a way influence how things move thereafter, and we are alive to being guided, I'm sure they would have picked very fundamental way forwards in this. So I thank you, and please keep the spirit up. There is no doubt that there is need for us to get back to normalcy, but all stakeholders that can, we must add our voices, despite the challenges around it, to talking to ourselves and encouraging ourselves and giving ourselves hope and courage that we will indeed come out of this. It might take long, but we will come out of it. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you very much, Jotham. I just want to get to you, our friend Shannon from Kenya. What is your parting shot to the Uganda and the world? We have had viewers all over the world who follow this discussion. Yes, Shannon, what is your parting shot?
Okay, thank you very much, Simon. So I think for me, my last word to Uganda is, I think it's for everyone to be proactive in just fighting and pushing this back. Because remember, even it's not a matter of maybe church leaders or activists. Each and every person has a role to play in actually rolling this back. You shouldn't really be in a position to think that the government is stubborn or your voices won't really be heard, because in every struggle, really, it's just whoever is consistent, and you really need to just push till the end, and knowing your role as an individual, because even as you're talking about how to prepare to reopen, even currently, even for Kenya, the person who created the curriculum, the schedule for the children to go back to school was not really the ministry. So it was a concerted efforts of parents and other key teachers who are really pro schools to reopen. So it's for you to see how you can be able to contribute and give the ideas, maybe do the structure and present it to the ministry, because government does not really necessarily have all the ideas or even the plan to reopen they have. Most of the time they actually don't have any idea. So it's for you to see how you can be able to strategize and influence others within your sphere, and just make a contribution, because that one contribution that you make will really influence many others, and to see finally the end result of the economy being opened. So everyone to just be proactive, whatever you do as an individual, that really counts. So thank you, Simon.
Thank you very much, Shannon. And she says there is a snowball effect to what we stand up against. I just want to bring in Mr. Mugoya Musa. What is your parting shot, sir?
Thank you very much, Simon. I should say this was my first time to attend your virtual town hall meetings, and I should say they are extremely informative. Second, I just have two appeals. One, to appeal to government out there to understand that yes, COVID-19 is here, but as they plan to reopen schools, I urge them to put the plan on the table, because you cannot be planning for the people and you're not involving the people that you're planning for. Education is not a matter for the government alone. Let them put the plan for reopening of schools on the table, and have it debated and discussed by the entire country, and people make proposals on some of the things that we need to change, and we move together. Lastly, to appeal to people, of course, with the big platforms. For example, our leader, Jothan, being a director of the Uganda Youth Network, you have a very big platform. So I urge you to use that platform and push for the reopening, because otherwise your biggest constituency is in big trouble. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm sure Jothan has taken that. He will respond off camera. I just want to bring in now Pastor Jack to give us a parting shot.
Mine would really be to thank you, Simon, for organizing this. Like Jothan has mentioned, it's been very informative, even for me as a panelist. And the comment that I'd leave to the listeners and all those that have been following is that, I mean, we cannot overemphasize the importance of every Ugandan getting up and playing a part. I find that as a nation, we leave a lot of things to the government to decide for us what should be and how things should be run. And that has crippled us and has really put us where we are at right now. So my appeal is to all people, parents, if I speak for the children, parents to rise up and actively participate in the right to education of the children. If schools open up, what is going to happen? How is it going to run? How can we help our children better prepare to go to school? How do we help them socially and mentally and psychologically to prepare them for school? Let everybody do what they can. Let us not sit back and leave this to the Ministry of Education or to the government at large. And for the church leaders, I think it has come out very clearly that we have a big part to play, a big role to play, especially so in this crisis time when we are preparing and saying we are preparing for the opening. How are our children, how are the people in our churches, in our communities prepared, or how ready are they to be able to go back into a fully open country, fully open economy, fully open schools? How ready are they? And what are the things that we can put in place now to help these people, help these children better be prepared for tomorrow? So every one of us needs to really think, to wake up and see that we add value in this moment. I mean, for some people, that is the impact. That is the reason you are alive today. Well, that's the reason we are here today, to contribute and make an impact in somebody's life, to give them hope and a brighter future.
Wow, thank you very much for those words of inspiration. Council Matanda, in 30 seconds, I'll request you to make your parting shots for this discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much, Simon, and all the people behind this. This, of course, is impactful. My parting shot, I would like to say, it's not in dispute what education can do to an individual and to a society. And so for a society like ours that is still backward and struggling with very basic issues of development, we cannot afford to lose on education. We cannot afford to approach education from a position of fear or ignorance or profit. We owe it to our young people, we owe it to the future of our country to see that we take action. And like it has been said, that never lose a crisis or a disaster, I think that this is another opportunity for us to try and have a fresh start. It has been a pleasure being part of this conversation, and like the other panelists have learned a lot. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much to all our panelists who have been able to join us. I am sure my apologies from one of our panelists, Megan Manso, was not able to join us, but I'm hoping that we can have her in the next engagement. Thank you so much for everyone, Jothan, Matanda, Musa, Pastor Jack, Shannon, anybody else I've left out, and for you, our very interesting viewers, keep the comments coming in, keep on sharing the hashtag, which is End Lockdown Now, and until next time, I know that we shall be having a very interesting conversation. God bless you, and remember to keep hope alive. Remember that this has gone away, this has been dealt with, so there's no need for fear, no need for anything that puts you into any form of condemnation or anything, but know that all is well and all is good. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a good day.